Hold on, y'all. I'm trying to figure out where to put this because I didn't bring my stand today accidentally. So I'm trying to see where I want to set this phone to where it's in a comfortable spot. And oh shit, I hit the wrong button. Hold on. There we go. Oh, do I want this in the background? Is that cute? We might put that in the background. Just to have a little background. Put up. I just don't want to fuck up my charger. I know it's going to get fucked up for me doing this. That's why tomorrow I cannot forget my stand. Because excuse me. Sorry, y'all. I just have to set this weird because I forgot my fucking stand today. So, oh, I got my earrings. Let me put my earrings on. Hold on, y'all. Maybe I'm in love with a criminal. Let's put my earrings on. Let's put my earrings on. You're the guy. I love the guy. Maybe I'm in love with a criminal. I love the guy. Sorry, y'all. I'm gonna leave the light on. It's fine. And this light. Oh, I'm just trying to set this on something. It's so annoying. Okie dokie. This is Confessions of a Video Vixen, Chapter 3. Oh. And I did see something on the internet, and usually I ignore people, but I have something to say. Just because you got passed around for free to certain people in your lifetime doesn't give you the right to place judgment on the next woman. Because I always see women who are the wildest try to talk about another woman. And usually the women who are speaking on another woman's sexuality are usually even more hypersexual. They just hide it. Imagine being such a hater that you hate on a motherfucker who made a life out of what was handed to her. She was sexually assaulted as a child, which we all know that creates hypersexuality. Some of you are so arrogant that you think that you can't learn from everybody. And that's why some of you are going to be stuck in the same spot forever. You can learn something from anybody. I just have to say a little PSA because I've seen a lot of bitches call other people hoes and then end up being the big hoe in real life. I know a lot of them, actually. Back to the movie, to the book. Chapter 3, Flower of the Bloom. My mother had been diligent in making sure that my life was as miserable as possible. I was never allowed to leave the apartment for anything other than school. There were no trips to the mall or skating rinks for me, nothing that would help me fit in with the other kids. Still, I eventually started to make friends in my new home of Tampa, to do some activities and have some fun outside and confine our small 2 bedroom apartment. When I turned 13, I found a best friend, Charlene. She was wonderful, and my mother, to my surprise, liked her. She was able to talk my mother into letting me go with her to the mall. Hold on, with her to the mall. Charlene told her mother would be picking us up told her that her mother would be picking us up afterward. I couldn't believe that I would be pulling up and walking around without an adult. This was new, liberating feeling, and I liked it. I finally felt normal. We spent 3 glorious hours window shopping, talking, and walking around the mall. Charlene's mother was scheduled to meet us out front in less than 3 hours. We waited for a while, and then finally a car slowed to a stop in front of us. I stepped toward the end of the sidewalk, grabbed the door handle, then stopped. It was not Charlene's mother, but a car full of boys I had never met. When I turned to look at Charlene, she was smiling. She greeted each one of the boys by name. They were apparently her friends. Charlene introduced me to them as she got in the back seat of the car, pulling me along beside her. There were 3 boys, obviously older than we were, and totally out of my league. That's when it hit me. The story about her mother picking us had been a lie. She had planned this along without mentioning a word to me. So without any protest, I slammed the car door behind me and we drove off. I trusted my best friend. Charlene was one of the more popular girls in school. She dressed in the latest fashions and had a confident air about her. I looked up to her and wanted so much to be like her. Her mother would let her do almost anything she wanted, and she always told me stories about the places she went and the people she hung out with. Jealous of her life, I did everything I could to be around and fit in with her. Charlene also wore a lot of makeup. I was mesmerized because I wasn't allowed to even wear clear lip gloss, and she knew all of the hottest music. Charlene even gave me my first nickname. We called ourselves sisters. That's what she was to me. We drove with these boys for what seemed just a short time. But I was unclear about where we were. I hadn't spent a whole lot of time out and about, even though I lived in the city. I didn't know my way around. We ended up at an apartment of another guy, and in addition to the 3 who were with us, there were 2 more guys in the apartment. After hanging out for a bit, I began to like one of the guys. His name was Ronnie, and I knew he liked me too. Everyone in the room was 17 and older, except for me and Charlene. The boys made me feel comfortable and accepted, so when Ronnie asked me to follow him, I did, right into the bedroom. I was tiny and cold. He asked me if I had ever had sex before, and I hesitantly answered no. Y'all, this is so crazy because I really be wanting to go like into deep, because a lot of this shit is deeper than what is on here, but I hate always having to go so deep, bro. Like, they were in on this. They set this whole like, they have been targeting underage females forever. This is how she ended up being a fucking stripper at 16. And it's always in the Black community or Hispanic community or somebody of race. Literally. Randomly, your mom has never let you leave the house ever, ever, ever. And then the one time she lets you go, your friend drive you to hang out with some boys. Right. Okay, let's go back to this. He asked me if I ever had sex before, and I hesitantly answered no. I wasn't sure if this made me cool or not. I was hoping it wouldn't deter him from doing what I thought both he and I wanted to do. To my surprise, I was ready and definitely curious. How you relax after a long day. Oh, I'm not motherfucking adding that Q&A sticker. Oh, let me go back. Sorry, it was a Q&A sticker that popped up. I thought somebody was asking me something. It was YouTube doing a suggestion. Okay, let me go back. To my surprise, I was ready and definitely curious. I stared into his deep green eyes and ran my fingers through his curly black hair. He spoke to me in Spanish as he hoisted my naked body onto the bathroom sink. I was shivering with fright, but also with anticipation. I felt a rush of adrenaline come over my entire body and I began to sweat. I had never been touched this way before. I couldn't understand how or why I felt so prepared to lose my virginity to this person. I had just met him a few hours before in a strange bathroom in a strange apartment, but I was. Somehow it felt empowering. I was drunk with the power of freedom. I wanted to stay out all night and didn't want this feeling to end. It did, though, when the piercing pain of penetration made me realize what I was doing. Ronnie placed me on the floor in an attempt to gain better entry, but to no avail. The pain was excruciating, and the pressure from his body crushed me as I became pinned between him and the floor. This was not the romantic scenario I had always envisioned. This was not right. Obviously, Ronnie had the same feeling because after about 15 minutes of trying, he gave up. I was relieved, to say the least. We returned to the living room, where everyone had been drinking and talking during our little experiment in the bathroom. Charlene instantly sat down beside me to get the details. After I told her that nothing really happened, she seemed pleased. What I couldn't have known then was that she had a serious secret crush on Ronnie and was angered that he liked me. In her mind, I had somehow crossed the line. There was another guy in the apartment. Everyone called him Rodney. All I can remember about him was that he had extremely dark skin and was not very attractive and had soulless eyes. After I came out of the bathroom with Ronnie, I could see Rodney's eyes, that it was now open season on me. Rodney stared at me intensely for a while, and I became nervous. I turned to Charlene and asked if we could leave. And just then, Rodney called Ronnie into the back room. I was uncomfortable. I knew something was terribly wrong. A few minutes passed and my legs began to shake. It was getting late and we were supposed to be home by now. If I didn't get home soon, there would be big trouble at my house. And as I expressed this to Charlene, she just blew me off. See, she probably was mad. I feel like I know where this is going. She didn't understand what kind of trouble went on at my house. She didn't have those kind of worries and fears. I couldn't go into details about the sort of consequences I would face. It was too embarrassing. So I pretended not to be worried. I managed to keep my legs from shaking and began to drink alcohol along with the rest of the crew. When Ronnie and Rodney emerged from the room, the look on their faces was unmistakable. Rodney had given the order. And from that moment, Ronnie didn't say another word to me or even look in my direction. Rodney sat down next to me on the sofa and my knees began to knock. For the first time ever, I just wanted to be at home with my mother. Even though the sight of him was making me sick, I said the words I wanted to hear. He said the words I wanted to hear. We're going to take you girls home. It wasn't long before we all piled into the car. It was late and the sun had gone down. I knew I wouldn't be in big trouble when I got home, so I began bracing myself for that moment. Yeah, I know exactly what was going to happen. Fucked up. I began to feel a bit relieved. Finally, I could see the two-story structure I lived in getting larger and larger still. Yet as we got closer, the car moved faster and we sped right past my apartment. I alerted the driver that he missed the spot. My apartment was back there, I yelled. Everyone in the car was silent. I was sandwiched between two guys, one of them Rodney in the back seat. Charlene was pinned against the back door the back right door, and when I looked over at her, she stared out the window as if everything was going as planned. I stared out the window with my eyes welling with tears. Then Rodney ordered, "Let's go to the house." I felt a sense of relief. I could just get out of the car. I could get away. I could run to a public place and get help. I was growing increasingly terrified. I was particularly scared of Rodney. He had that look in his eye. He was harsh and abrasive, and the other guys seemed afraid of him. He was in charge, and no one in the car would dare stand up to him. I was in trouble and apparently had no allies, not even my best friend. Eventually, we pulled up to the house. Rodney grabbed my wrist with all his strength and pulled me out of the car. The house was a monstrosity. It was a puzzle of brown boards in the sort of hexagon shape, and its frame stood on top of 15-foot stilts. This house had obviously once been someone's dream, and now it was abandoned. We had a lot in common, that house and me. The street we were on was dark by the lack of working lights. I looked around for a place to run. The house looked friendly and inviting, a house with no gate to humble with or no dog to deter me. I was planning my escape. We ascended to the wooden stairwell carefully. It seemed as if every other step was missing. The house was rotting with termites, and the front entrance there was a big gaping hole in the floor, through which the ground 15 feet below could be seen. As the crew moved past the dangerous obstacles almost without looking, it was clear that they had been there before. Rodney took me to the corner of the house away from the others. My heart was beating so hard and so loud that I couldn't hear a word he was saying to me. What was clear, though, that he had a strong hold on my wrist and his slimy tongue wandering around my neck and face. I wanted to throw up on him. He licked and kissed my shivering frame. He lifted my skirt and roughly fondled my underdeveloped breast before he began to unbutton my jeans. My right hand became numb from the grip he had on me, and I was beginning to cry. I cried silently, and to my digest, my tears excited him. He began to ravish me, tearing the stitching of my shirt and scratching my skin as he tugged at my pants. The neighborhood dog had been barking from the moment we pulled up to the house, and by the time the neighbors were in their yard, I could hear them talking, wondering what was going on. My silent cries grew louder and eventually turned into screams. "Call the police," I heard from outside. Rodney loosened my grip on my wrist and relocated to my neck. "Let's go," was the order, and everyone barreled out of the house, down the steps, and back into the car. It must have been extremely late because there were no people anywhere as we drove around the city looking for a place to finish the evening. Rodney took hold of my wrist again, and now he was mad as hell, with fire in his eyes. I could tell by the conversation in the car that Rodney, allegedly only 18 years old at the time, was a criminal and had spent time in jail. I was terrified and had become almost numb at this point. I stared blankly into space, and my breathing slowed, and I went to another place. I was back home in St. Thomas at my grandmother's house. I was picking the fruit from the trees, bananas, papayas, and guavas. I was young again and safe. I could smell my grandmother's fish and rice. I was loved. The car stopped abruptly when Ronnie gave the order. I opened my eyes and saw the motel. I was never going to get out of there. I thought. Rodney got out and unscrewed the bolts of the air conditioner of the country yard style motel room. He pushed the air conditioning unit into the room, crawled in behind it, and unlocked the door for the rest of us. I just stared into the space, a zombie. Exactly what happened after this remains a mystery to me because I was gone, back into a happy place. I do remember that there were two beds in the room. Rodney and I were on one. Charlene and Ronnie and the other guys were on another. They were talking and laughing amongst themselves as if what was going on in the next bed was not disturbing. I was trapped under the covers by Rodney as he lay on top of me. His right hand was around my neck. His left hand was pulling off my pants. My next memory is of him inside of me, tearing away my insides. I screamed and cried simultaneously. I clawed and kicked him tirelessly. He took his hand from my neck and covered my mouth with the same forceful grip he had applied to my wrist. I could feel his hot, moist breath as he painted over me. A puddle of murky sweat pulled under my rib cage and in my navel. He was dirty. His body carried odor of devious determination. I could feel my virgin skin ripping, and the pain sent strobes of lightning shooting through my head as if I overheated from the panic. I could catch my breath, and I couldn't fight it anymore. He was winning, and I was losing much more than my purity. Sorry, y'all, I'm starting to get a little hungry. I knew that was going to happen, but I thought it was going to be worse. I thought all of them were going to rape her. And people wonder why. This is exactly why I don't want friends. Every single bitch that I ever tried to be friends with was always jealous of me. When people are jealous of you, they do shit like this to you. Literally. This is exactly why you always see Nola by herself. Because Nola is never going to betray Nola. This is why I don't want friends. You were so mad that the boy that you secretly liked, that you never even told me that you liked me, that you let me be raped in front of you and everybody else. This is why. You remember that story that we just talked about yesterday? When we was talking about Tweet and all them executives raped her? I'm sure her friends had everything to do with it. They probably set it up. This is why I don't want friends. Okay, let's go back. This is so crazy to me. I don't remember reading this part. This is so heartbreaking to me. Okay. Let's go back to where I was at. I could feel his hot, moist breath. He was dirty. Okay. I overheated from the panic. I couldn't catch my breath and I couldn't fight anymore. He was winning and I was losing much more than my purity. My insides weren't as inviting as he would have wanted. So the next memory I have is of him giving Ronnie the order to hold my legs down while he went into the bathroom. He was shaking and the look of Ronnie's eyes was pitiful. He knew this was wrong, but he wasn't man enough to face Rodney. A few short seconds later, Rodney returned with something in his hands. He began rubbing his hands together and lathering began to form around his rough black fingers. He rubbed soap into my torn flesh in order to gain lubrication. Oh my motherfucking God, this was torture, bitch. I screamed in agony. It burned as if it were acid being poured directly into my lacerated cavity. If you get soap in your vagina, it burns even if you're not having sex. If you get it up inside and you don't rinse it out and you leave it in for too long, it will irritate you. Exhausted and relieved when it was over, I fell asleep. The next morning, Charlene, who was now no longer afraid to be on my side, We're the first two on awaken. We quietly got dressed and planned our escape. Just then, she pointed out to me the hideous hickey Rodney had placed on my neck. That man had thought of any way he could to mark and scar my body, to scar my spirit. Just as we were trying to leave, the others woke up and stopped us from leaving. Rodney didn't try to restrain me from this point on. I guess he had already achieved whatever it was he set out to do, and now he was simply hungry, and McDonald's was directly next door. So the plan was for us to walk over for breakfast. Charlene and I looked at each other and knew this would be our only chance to get away. We just needed to run as fast as we could. And that's when we did. As the guys walked toward the counter to order breakfast, Charlene and I slipped into the bathroom. We took about 15 seconds to come up with a game plan and immediately put it to work. Opening the door and peeking in the restaurant, we could see that the guys weren't facing in our direction. Then we were off to the far right of us in line, and to our near left was the door through which we just entered. So as not so as not to bring any attention to ourselves, we calmly walked out the door to the sidewalk. Then, without saying a word, we both started running as fast as we could. The guy saw us through the window restaurant and began to give a chase. By the time they made it out to the sidewalk, we had already hit the corner. Our hearts stopped when we realized that we had just turned onto a dead-end street. We could hear them running and calling out to us. We had to do something and do it fast. Next to us were a few cars parked along the sidewalk again. Without saying a word to each other, we instinctively crouched down and slid under one of the cars. Seconds later, the sounds of their feet followed by whispers. I couldn't hear what was being said, but the sound of my heart beating, and in an instant, they just gave up and walked back towards McDonald's. Charlene and I didn't trust the situation, so we waited a few minutes before we moved from under the car, then ran quickly toward the nearest payphone. Charlene called her mother and told her to pick us up at the corner. When she slammed that phone back to the receiver, I felt this part of the ordeal was over, but I knew that there was something just as traumatizing waiting for me at home. The ride to my house was surprisingly calm as I sat in the back seat of my car. Charlene and her mother were in deep conversation, and what was so surprising was the tone of discussion. Although her mother was obviously disappointed, she was still kind and loving, and she listened. And when it came to her turn to speak, she did it with more concern than anger. I wondered if Charlene understood how great she had it. And then I thought about what would happen when I walked through the door at my mother. My heart began to race, and I was having difficulty breathing. From the ride in the car to the long walk to the front door, I was blank. I don't remember everything clearly during that short stretch of time, but I do remember my mother answering the door. Without even blinking, she grabbed me by my hair and threw me to the ground. She began to punch and kick my head, neck, and chest. So imagine being just sexually assaulted for hours and then going home and getting your ass beat. This girl had it bad. And when you really know who was behind all of this, it's very telling. And then even her story about how she went to LA and just randomly got the role, and Vin Diesel and Lorenz Tate were. There are some very, very sick, demonic, evil, miserable people in this world who do nothing but try to destroy and break other people's spirit because their spirit is already broken and their lives are already destroyed. There are some very, very sick, evil individuals in this earth. I'm telling you. Evil. I don't even want to read this, but it's so good. But girl. Okay. Let's go back to it. From the ride into the car to the long walk to the front door, I was blank. I don't remember everything clearly during that short stretch of time, but I do remember my mother answering the door. Without even blinking, she grabbed me by my hair and threw me to the ground. She began to punch and kick my head, neck, and chest. She screamed, "You smell like sex. You're disgusting. Go take a shower." So imagine just going through the tragic event of just getting sexually assaulted, and then this is what you come home to. I was waiting for Charlene's mother to jump in and save me, but she and Charlene stood in our front doorway with shocked looks on their faces. Charlene's mother had worked for the Child Welfare and Protection Department, so I knew she was accustomed to helping children in my situation. Off duty now, she did nothing as my mother beat blood out of my face right there before her. My mother never once stopped to ask what happened. She never once expressed concern or worry about me, never asked if I was all right. She automatically attacked me and made me feel dirty and low, the same way I had felt in that hotel room. A lot of these people who do these things, because there are people who are pulling the strings behind the scenes, they want you to feel low because they feel low. And that's why they target certain people, especially young Black females. Now they want you to grow up and have low self-esteem and have a broken spirit and need therapy and rely on drugs and alcohol. It's not an accident. Oh, and they want you to be promiscuous, because most people who are sexually assaulted, which it is a very alarming number of how many people, especially Black females, are sexually assaulted. But it's probably an even bigger number of boys. It's just boys don't get reported. I'm seeing a pattern here. All right, let's go back. My mother never went. Okay, The next thing I remember was being thrown into a scalding shower. There was no punishment that could compare to what had just that had. There was no compared to what I just endured. Being held captive and raped. The near boiling water hit my skin and I blacked out. I slid down on the floor of the tub and curled into a fetal position. I was so drained and so empty I didn't even cry. The water washed away the physical evidence of what had happened the night before. But the emotional scars would remain. Later that day, I was looking out of my bedroom window, watching the other kids play. Things were back to normal and I was not allowed outside except to go to school. I turned on the radio and there was Patti LaBelle singing, "Somebody Loves You." I listened closely to the words of the song. It was the first time I had heard them, and it touched me to the core, and how I wanted Patty to be right. I cried as I watched the kids outside. I wanted to be one of them, happy and free. I wanted to be able to play without worry or fear, but I knew I was different. I was not happy, and I would never again be a child. I did not mature the way I should have. I was always nervous and always afraid. I had no confidence in myself and largely withdrew from everyone. I was so nervous, I wet the bed and sucked my thumb constantly up until I was in high school. The bedwetting happened every night without fail. Again, my mother was never concerned with any reason why. She just made me feel bad and disgusting because of it. She verbally attacked me every morning when I woke up in a pool of my own urine, which only made me more nervous. This was a vicious cycle and I wanted out. This is chapter 4. Oh my gosh. That was a heavy scene, boy. I felt that in my heart. I felt that in my chest. That is just, Chapter 4, On the Run. While growing up on the island, I was a diligent student and loved school, but almost immediately after we moved to Florida, I became unfocused. going from a straight A student to barely being able to pass my classes. Without the love, support, and encouragement of my grandmother, I looked for those things outside of my home. I found that what I thought I had been looking for with the neighborhood kids. We started hanging out during my free 2 hours after school. Soon after, I started skipping school altogether in order to extend my socializing hours. I would attend the first few classes and leave the campus for lunch. Sometimes I would go home and sometimes to a friend's house. The majority of my friends were boys. It was easier for me to fit in with them, and I found it difficult to have girlfriends. I'm guessing that was because of the roles my parents played in my life. With my father being gone, I would always be looking for his replacement. And with the already damaged relationship with my mother, I would never feel comfortable around other girls. I never respected or liked them. During the days of cutting school and hanging out, I would I was also drinking heavy and smoking. This became my routine. At home, I confined myself to my room, which was fine with my family. I didn't fit in with my mother and my two sisters. And in many ways, I resented them all. I read a lot, usually mystery novels, anything written by Agatha Christie, such and Then They Were None, Cat Among the Pigeons, and The Hollow. Agatha took me to another world where the events leading to the ending of the novel were unpredictable. I enjoyed not knowing what was to come and would rush back into my room between meals and chores to find out who killed whom and why. I was also a great fan of poetry and short stories and studied the works of Maya Angelou and Edgar Allan Poe. Maya wowed me with the I know why the caged bird sings in Phenomenal Woman and Still I Rise. Maya gave my spirit strength with nothing with her mothering voice, while Edgar Allan Poe took me back the timeless took me back to the timeless and formal elegance in literature. I studied his technique in such poem as The Raven and Nevermore in his short stories. I discovered myself in books and in music. I listened to the radio, singing along, pretending, imagining myself a star. I would reenact scenes from my favorite films and rehearse my acceptance speech to the Academy in front of the mirror. I spent time writing poetry and recording all my thoughts and pain in my journals, becoming increasingly inverted and an outsider in my own home. Of all the Christmases I spent with my mother, one, when I was about 15, made the biggest impression on the rest of my life. From the day I came home after being raped, my mother began to tell anyone who would listen what an awful child I was. She told friends and family members I was evil and on drugs. When the beatings were particularly vicious, I reached out to the counselors and officials at my school. I showed up at my school with bruises, lacerations, and even a sprained neck. But my mother had them all fooled. She lied to cover her actions and made me out to be the bad one. Eventually succeeded in making everyone dislike me. Things had become inverted since we left St. Thomas, and now she was the good guy. This particular Christmas, I left my room and walked slowly into the living room. There were maybe 45 presents under the tree. My little sisters were tearing away at their wrappings, and my mother sat on the couch snapping pictures. I walked closer to the tree, and my eyes began roaming around the base of it looking for my gifts. I wasn't expecting much, but I was excited just the same. And I was looking. My sisters were yelling and screaming with joy to see the gifts from my mother as well as gifts from her family. My mother's family had always been split, her mother's side and her father's side. Once we moved to Florida, she disconnected from her mother's side and only acknowledges her father's side. I stooped down and began kneeling so I could get a better view under the tree. I cleared away the mountains of torn wrapping paper and ribbons and pushed my sister's gifts to the side. I continued to look. As I did, no one said a word to me. No one even acknowledged my presence. I retreated from the Christmas tree once I realized there was nothing there for me. They did this to this girl. This is exactly what a systematic takedown looks like. They want to ostracize you and make you feel like you're to yourself. She started drinking and smoking, which that is part of the systematic takedown that Nicki Minaj was tweeting about. Not one thing. My mother had made everyone believe I was unworthy and no one in the family showed me love during the holiday. Of course, her father's side of the family believed what she said. They had never known me. They had never loved me. My heart sank into my stomach and it became a few degrees colder in my room. My mother could never have gotten away with this if my grandmother had been around. She had purposely disconnected me from my roots. She had brought me to this town figuratively figuratively kill me off, and I would have to fight to stay alive. I closed my bedroom door behind me and plowed into my mattress. At first, I began to cry, but then I received a phone call from a boy. I liked that kid in this neighborhood called Bam Bam. He was older than me, around 19 years old, and had just moved to Florida from Queens, New York. I can't remember how we met, but I was glad we did. He was sweet to me and would always ask me how I was doing. He always wanted to know if I had a bad day and what was wrong. I answered the phone to hear, "Hey, baby girl, Merry Christmas." Smiling from ear to ear, I replied, "Hey, Bam, I'm not doing so good. I didn't get anything for Christmas, and no one even spoke to me." Bam Bam seemed as disappointed as I said and said, "Don't worry, baby girl, I'll get you something. I'll have it for you when I see you." He made my day. I hung up the phone and lay in bed feeling better. I replayed that conversation in my head over and over. Over the next few years, things at home would come deteriorate, but continue to deteriorate. I decided to fight back. I told myself that the next time my mother put her hands on me, I would hit her back. I cannot recall exactly what the issue was on that day, but I do know that when my mother hit me, I kicked and punched back. I fought for my life, and that afternoon in the hallway on the apartment, "Oh, you want to fight?" she screamed. "Oh, you want to fight? You can't beat me. I will kill you." I believed her. I didn't win that fight, and I realized I couldn't stay. I packed a few things, left my mother a note, and sneaked out of my first story bedroom window. I was running away and had no intentions of ever coming back. I don't remember what was packed, but of the few belongings I was taking, my Wu Tang Clan tape was my most treasured. It was my first hip hop tape, and it would soon serve as a soundtrack to my first taste of voluntary freedom. I played that tape until the ribbon popped. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that she's putting this in here because if you know, you know. That's all I can say. There's no mistake of why she's putting, "Oh, I had my Wu Tang CD. Oh, she came on the radio at this time." When you know, you know. I had been on the streets for about 2 weeks, going from pillar to post, staying with friends and friends of friends. Everyone I knew was older than me and had their own apartment. I stayed with older boys, and I even stayed with I even stayed at an abandoned house of a guy who had been sent to prison. I was not alone, however. Charlene, my best friend, came along for the ride. She and she and I had never discussed what took place that night. I was raped, but we still remained friends. We were soon met by some other runaway girls who frequented the area and knew the guy who owned the abandoned house. I was homeless, underfed, and on many days dirty with nowhere to take a shower. What I hadn't realized about this abandoned house was that it was in a crack infested, prostitute riddled neighborhood. I was so naive. One time I was standing on the corner with a couple of girls from the house at the local liquor store asking for change to buy food, and a stranger in a car invited us back to his place. We jumped into the car with a Jamaican stranger. I was eager to get something to eat and a place to shower. In retrospect, I realized he thought we were hookers and he was looking for a good time at our expense. Fortunately, back at his house, his friends didn't want us, and we were consequently returned to the street corner where the guy had found us. Still, I would have rather lived in this abandoned building with no lights and no water, begging for food and money in the worst neighborhood in Tampa Bay, then go home. It seemed almost impossible to imagine now, but I lived on the street for close to a month. One Saturday night, I was hanging out on the strip where there were teen clubs and places to eat, a movie theater and such. This was my first time in this part of town and my first time hanging out like this. The night felt cool and inviting on my face. We were all smiling and laughing carefree. Charlene and I had other girls from our place. We were all there together acting like the kids we were. We weren't concerned about a thing. We didn't have any money or anywhere to go at the end of the night, but we were happy to be there amongst our peers. I was the happiest of all. I saw friends from school who I hadn't seen since I had run away, and they all let me know about the signs my mother had posted around the school and the neighborhood. I knew she would be looking for me, but I was shocked when I turned around to see her standing right behind me. There was my mother with her best friend in tow, side by side with a few members of the Tampa Bay Police Department. Her arms were folded tightly, and I could see the look of ear on her face. She gave me the eye, and I knew my life would never be the same after this night. Suddenly, her look changed from anger to concern and relief. It was a big act for the police. The police asked me why I left home, and I began to tell them about the beatings and the time she hit me with a 2x4 wooden plank and hurt my neck, and about all the times I tried to tell the counselors at school, and she would come in and do the same thing she's doing now, lie and act. They can tell you, I said to the police, pointing to my friends. They know. My friends nodded in compliance. I knew this was my only chance. I had to convince the police that I was telling the truth. If I went home with my mother, I thought she would surely kill me. You're lying, my mother shouted. None of that ever happened. Why are you lying like that? Her friend chimed in. I don't blame her friend. She only had my mother's perspective to rely on, and my mother did a good job at painting this ugly portrait of me. She hadn't turned the whole conversation against me, making them all think that I was on drugs and even that I was possessed by the devil. She told everyone I was a whore and that I had been having sex with all of my guy friends, when nothing could be farther from the truth. She defamed and degraded my character. I couldn't let her win on this night. I know mothers who are exactly like this. There are a lot of women in this life who hate the choices that they made and want to make their children, especially their daughters' lives, fucking miserable. And when they can't find anything to speak about you, they will start lying on you. I know mothers just like this. Let me see. I couldn't let her win on this night. I couldn't. I wouldn't. As I stood there in front of the police, I cried my heart out and begged them to believe me. I had become hysterical with desperation and began to hyperventilate. I was placed in the back of the squad car. The two officers sat up front. Calm down. It's going to be okay, the officer on my right said. We're here to help you. He was there to help me. The very concept had begun foreign to me. I felt as if no one had been on my side since we left St. Thomas. I had no one in Florida. There was no one to burst into my room and rescue me from her. Now it seemed as if someone might. Now you know, if you don't go home, we'll have to take you to juvie, the officer said. I don't care, I said without hesitation. Take me. You won't have any clean clothes there, he said. And there is a uniform you'll have to wear every day. It's not as nice as the things you have on now, and the food is not good either, and the other kids there aren't nice like you are. I didn't flinch. Take me, I said, because if you send me back there with her, I will kill her. And if I don't, I'm certain that she will kill me. If you send me back, you'll just have to come and get me again in the morning. The look of the officer's eyes, as if they met mine, determined and defiant, gave me hope. The decision he made changed my life, yet again. Where's your father? He asked. I began to sob uncontrollably. I don't know. Well, what's his name? Kenneth. As soon as I blurted out the name of my father, the officer jerked himself out of the car and went over to my mother. I could see him take out his pen and pad and began to scribble feverishly. Within seconds, he was back in the driver's car. Here's his name and location, the officer said. He's in Phoenix. I was confused. I had no idea what my father would be doing in Arizona since the last time I heard he was in New York. Nonetheless, I just felt relieved. Before my sisters were born, my mother and I would run back and forth to New York from St. Thomas, chasing behind my father. When I was 5, she moved us into a tiny 4-floor studio apartment on the corner of Barson's Boulevard and Hillside Avenue in Jamaica, Queens. The hallway and stairways were little, with homeless men who pissed on the walls and floors. On occasions, I would look outside one window in the apartment adjacent to ours and see a fat, naked man with a long, grizzly beard, guzzling liquids and stuffing his face with leftover food from God knows where. I could look down the alley between my building and his and see the trash heap foaming and the dog-sized rats running and ravaging through it. This was poverty at its finest, and I had been living in it because of my mother. I had been living in it because my mother was ever hopeful she could win my father back. My father often came to see me, and on quite a few occasions, he would take me back to his house in Central Islip, Long Island. I loved it there. Leaf Avenue was a beautiful street lined with towering oaks and 2-story homes nestled on each side. And the end of this long, picture perfect street was a church. And every hour on the hour, the church bell rang. To me, it was a constant reminder that I was safe and that God was there. I was 6 around this time, and my father had been and my father had 2 daughters, Tony and Jennifer, from a previous marriage. But Tony and Jennifer were more than a decade older than me. We played outside with the other neighborhood kids, and they would try to teach me how to ride a bike, a 2-wheeler, and my feet could barely reach the pedals. I stretched my limbs, trying to impress my big sisters, and there was always a family of squirrels scurrying out of my way up the trees, as if they knew I was new to this. I remember so many things about that house and the neighborhood, the sounds, the smells, the people. The house next door had burned down, and I thought to myself that our house must have been protected by God because it was unharmed. I remembered catching fireflies of lightning bugs and putting them in the glass jars, placing them beside our beds as we slept. They would be dead by morning, and we replaced them with new ones every night. At the church at the end of our street, they served free lunch, and like clockwork, my sisters and I were there. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, milk and cookies. Those were days for me. They were simple, and I was safe. My father had gotten my mother a job at Altman's department store in Manhattan, in the men's department. He was a buyer at Bloomingdale's and had connections. My mother seemed happy. She did everything she could to be what she thought he needed, but I learned that my father was only tolerating her for my sake. This was obvious from the way she would beg him to stay when he visited our apartment, and from the way she would become infuriated when all he wanted was to take me back to Long Island. During the days and weeks that I spent on Long Island, my father had no use for my mother because he had me. This made her furious. So one day while my father was at work, my mother came to the perfect house on that perfect block and in that perfect neighborhood and took me away. My father's mother, Meryl, and his father, Edmund, and my sisters, Tony and Jennifer, watched as my mother snatched me up and drove off. I kicked and screamed and cried. Please don't make me go. Please let me stay. Please, please, I cried. She slapped me and told me to shut up. I reminisced to myself about those days, and I sat in the back of the police car in Tampa, Florida. I was finally hopeful about something. I was looking forward to the possibility of seeing my father again. If we can track your father down, would you like to go live with him? The officer said. I couldn't get the words yes out of my mouth fast enough. I said it twice to make sure he heard, to make sure it came out right. Yes, yes. To my surprise, the officers worked on finding my father then and there. They would not release me into the custody of my mother until they found him. We found your father. Now, tomorrow we're going to work on getting you to him, the officer said. But for now, you'll have to go home to your mother. We've spoken to her, and she promised that she will not lay a hand on you. Get there, get some rest, and get your things together. It looks like you'll be going to Phoenix. I smiled and cried at the same time. Could this be true? I was finally going to be able to leave this hell. Was I really going to be safe and see my father for the first time in almost 10 years? The deal was made. I would go home with my mother, but not for long. I was Phoenix bound. Okay, that was chapter 3 and chapter 4. It's getting really good. Like I said, I read this before, but I was a lot younger. But whew, this girl went through it for real. Stop having children to keep a man. We need to normalize having children out of love, because there are so many kids who go through that. Literally. But yeah, we're going to end it right there.